Good afternoon, teacher.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for accepting to be interviewed. The current interview is about differences in the use of the same language. It will not take more than 5 to 10 minutes. Can we start?
Of course.
How can you differentiate language from dialect?
Well, the way to differentiate, this is very discussed because there's not any definite separation. Dialect and languages are different because if they're understood. For example, I can take the Britons. The Britons came from different tribes, but they could basically understand themselves amongst them. What united them was the history that went through that land, and it tied them together, and it eventually became a language. But it was tied together through dialects. Also, I can say Spanish and Tagalog in the Philippines. Tagalog is very, very similar, although it is a native language. But the Spaniards came in and it became one. So the Tagalog dialect or language at that time is now considered a dialect and a subderivative of Spanish, but it's not. It was its own natural language at the time.
How can you define morphology?
Morphology. Okay, morphology would be the way, basically what I was speaking of before. Morphology would be the way that words come about, how they become a word, from where they derive, the root word, the base word. It also includes geography and everything that has to do with the moving of the people from one place to another, where they are, where they're located, if they've had any connection with other civilizations. Sometimes civilizations which are apart maintain the more pure version. Whereas, for example, American English is very different than the British English, even within the United States, due to geography and different influences of the immigration.
How can you define syntax?
Syntax, okay, well, syntax is a whole different thing. It means how we put the words in a sentence, and the difference it makes whether you put, for example, an adjective at the very beginning or at the very end of a word, or if you put it in the middle and you define something. So you could be saying the same thing with the same words but with a different context. It turns the whole thing around. So it's kind of like playing Scrabble. You're playing Scrabble with words or crossword puzzle, but it gives you a different meaning, not due to intonation or pronunciation, the words themselves and their location in the sentence.
What is the most common way in which dialects of a language vary? Pronunciation, spelling, or sentence formation?
Okay, I would say the most common would be pronunciation. We can use our own environment as it is. Here in Ecuador, we have different provinces, basically different regions. We speak the same language, nevertheless, we all speak it differently. Well, I don't speak it as anyone else here. Nevertheless, you can tell the difference between anyone who is from the highlands or who is from the coast. Even though they're using the same words, they use dialects, the same thing, it definitely comes out differently due to climate and geography.
What is the most common reason for dialects to vary?
Oh, definitely. I think I've mentioned it 100 times so far, but for me it's migration. I think it all has to do with geography and climate. For example, in the highlands it's so cold, we have a tendency of closing our mouths a little bit more when we say things. Or also, like I said, the climate here, we're a little bit warmer, we're hotter, so we say things quicker and faster. There they're a little more formal. It's just traditions in some part, because they are more formal. It probably has to do with the fact that there's much more government and official things going on there, that they try to keep that outlook. Whereas here we've kind of been like hardworking and trying to figure out how to get our way. So we're a little quicker and faster. And since it's hot and warm and we're friendlier, I think that we tend to include more people. And as we include more people into our environment, we also adapt their words into ours.
Taking into account English language, can you tell an existing difference in regard to pronunciation, spelling, and sentence formation between British and American English?
Oh, sure. Even in class, I'm sure that you can remember I used to always say, wait, this is a word that's more British than American. Even the spelling, color, favorite, word differentiation such as apartment or flat, mate, classmate, friend, cigarette. A cigarette is a fag, which for us is something totally different. There are many variations of the English and American, the British and the American English, but we still understand each other. Rubbish is one that one of my students who recently went to Cambridge, she came back and said, why did everyone laugh at me when I said trash? They'd say, no, that's not trash, that's rubbish. So there are small variations, but on the whole, we all can basically understand these without being a dialect. They're not two languages, so it's kind of just, I wouldn't even consider it a dialect or a language. I would just say a different version of English. I don't think we're that far-fetched.
Is there any other dialect variation that you can tell how it happens?
Let's see, the Spanish, of course. We have the original Spaniards. I'm not, I'm certainly not an expert, but I can tell the difference between, even in South America, the English and the Spanish invasion of South America left different variations of Spanish due to the mixture of the people where they inhabited. So you can see the difference in Spanish from Argentina with one from Brazil because of the Portuguese invasion, and although they speak Spanish. You can see the difference between people from Chile and Venezuela, Bolivia and Ecuador. I mean, we all speak Spanish. Nevertheless, there's that differentiation even in Central America, where you have the Caribbean influence on the Spanish. So yeah, it happens in every language, and it all depends, once again, on the people, on the places, and the movement of the people who come and go.